Before the streets knew him as Ghost, he was just a boy trying to survive. Born in the cold, hard corners of New York City, life never gave him a break. His mother worked long hours, barely able to make ends meet, leaving him to navigate a world full of danger and temptation. From a young age, he saw things most children never should: friends disappearing, neighbors getting caught up in fights, sirens screaming through the night, and the constant presence of fear that seemed to seep into every street and building. The neighborhood was a living, breathing challenge, and he learned quickly that weakness was not an option. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he was smart, quiet, and observant. He noticed patterns that others missed, learned which people could be trusted and which ones could betray you in an instant. School was no escape. Teachers didn't understand him, and the world inside the classroom felt just as dangerous as the streets outside. He carried the weight of his family's struggles and the silent burden of knowing that every choice mattered. He saw friends fall into the wrong path, lured by quick money and dangerous allure, and he knew that if he wasn't careful, he could be next. And yet, there was a fire in him, a determination to rise above the circumstances that surrounded him. Even as a kid, he had the mind of someone far beyond his years, calculating each step, watching, learning, and waiting for the moment when opportunity would knock dot early on. He found guidance in unlikely places. There were older kids in the neighborhood who respected him for his sharp mind and calm demeanor, and slowly, he started learning the rules of survival from them. These mentors didn't teach him morality, they taught him strategy. How to make deals without getting caught, how to read people before they spoke, how to build alliances that could protect him when danger came knocking. Every encounter, every small hustle, every favor done or owed became a lesson in the game he was about to play. He was no longer just surviving, he was learning the ways to control his destiny in a world that had tried to keep him small. But life wasn't just about learning the streets. He carried the weight of loss. Family, friends, and mentors came and went, often in violent or unfair ways. These losses hardened him, teaching him that attachment could be a weakness and that trust was earned, not given. Yet, behind the stoic exterior, there was still the heart of a boy who wanted more than just survival. He dreamed of respect, of power, of a life that wasn't dictated by fear. He knew that the path ahead was dangerous, but the thought of failing was even scarier. And so, with the streets as both his teacher and his battlefield, young Ghost began the slow, deliberate climb from boy to legend, shaping himself in the shadows, preparing for a world that had no mercy for those who weren't ready. Every choice, every street corner, every whispered conversation added another layer to his identity. He became cautious, but confident, silent, but always observing. The neighborhood didn't know it yet, but a force was growing among them. Someone who would not just survive the game, but change it forever. This was the foundation, the early life of young Ghost. A life marked by struggle, sharpened by loss, and fueled by ambition. And though the world outside only saw a boy, inside, a king was slowly emerging, ready to step into a story that would shock everyone who thought they knew him. The streets had tested him, and he had passed, but surviving was only the first step. Young Ghost quickly realized that to stay alive, he had to rise above the chaos around him. He wasn't interested in petty fights or meaningless scraps. He wanted control, respect, and power. Every alley, every corner, and every deal became a lesson, a puzzle he needed to solve. He observed older players, watching their moves like a chess master, studying his opponents, learning not just how to hustle, but how to outsmart, outlast, and outmaneuver everyone around him. The small hustles. He started with selling cigarettes, running messages. Even petty theft were more than survival. They were practice for the bigger game. Every small risk he took taught him how to read people, how to predict behavior, and how to manipulate situations without anyone realizing it. It wasn't long before he drew attention. Not the kind you want from the police, but the kind that comes from respect in the streets. Words spread quietly, whispers of a young kid who moved carefully, never wasted energy, and always seemed to know what was coming next. Rivals tried to test him, seeing if his reputation matched reality. Some failed, some barely survived. Ghost learned quickly that power wasn't given. It was earned through calculated risks and measured actions. He formed alliances with those who could elevate him, while keeping enemies close enough to watch, but far enough not to strike. Loyalty became a currency, and Ghost learned to spend it wisely. Trust was fragile, and betrayal was everywhere, but he never let it shake him. Every setback became a strategy, every betrayal a lesson in survival does. He moved deeper into the game. He began to understand the rules beyond street-level hustling. Money alone wasn't enough. Influence, fear, and perception mattered just as much. He cultivated an image calm, collected, almost untouchable. People followed him, not because they liked him, but because they respected the way he thought, the way he never panicked, the way he always had a plan. Deals grew bigger, stakes grew higher, and so did the risks. He learned how to negotiate without anger, how to intimidate without violence, and how to turn situations to his advantage before anyone else even realized. There was a move to make. Each successful venture was a step closer to power, but it also meant enemies were watching, waiting for the moment he slipped. Ghost understood this danger and thrived in it. Even as his reputation grew, he never forgot where he came from. The streets that shaped him were also a constant reminder that nothing was permanent. Friends could disappear overnight, rivals could strike without warning, and the law could close in at any moment. He became a master of balance, careful yet daring, silent yet commanding. Every decision was weighed, every action deliberate. He avoided unnecessary attention, letting others make mistakes while he studied from the shadows. And when the time came to strike, he did so with precision, never hesitation. Young Ghost wasn't just surviving the game anymore. He was shaping it. People around him began to realize that he wasn't like the rest. He wasn't reckless, and he wasn't driven by anger or desperation. He was driven by vision, a calculated desire to climb higher than anyone had ever imagined. By the time he reached the threshold of true power, the boy who once wandered the streets with nothing but instincts and courage had transformed into someone unstoppable. He understood the network of the streets, the flow of money, the fears of rivals, and the subtle art of influence. Every challenge he faced, every lesson learned, had forged him into a figure both respected and feared. And while others were still trying to find their place, Ghost had already begun to redefine the rules. The rise of Young Ghost was more than a story of survival. It was a story of strategy, ambition, and intelligence that turned a boy from the shadows into a legend that the streets could never ignore. Even as danger and betrayal continued to loom, he moved forward with confidence, knowing that the game was no longer about keeping up. It was about leading, controlling, and becoming. A force that no one could predict or stop. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But the streets never let anyone rise without paying a price. Young Ghost had learned to move with precision, to think ahead, and to stay 3 steps in front of everyone else. Yet no amount of skill or caution could have prepared him for the moment. When his world shifted, it started with whispers small, rumors that felt harmless at first, just chatter about rivals plotting, allies questioning loyalty, and the ever-present threat of the law closing in. Ghost had faced danger before, but this was different. It was bigger, closer, and more personal. One wrong move could destroy everything he had built, and in that moment, he realized that the streets could turn on him as easily as they had taught him to thrive. The incident came late one night, in a corner of the city where shadows moved, faster than the eye could follow. A deal, carefully ranged, suddenly went wrong. Details were unclear, but betrayal was undeniable. People he trusted, people he had helped rise, had chosen to turn against him, lured by greed or fear or perhaps revenge. The streets that once felt like a map he could navigate now became a maze of traps. And for the first time, young Ghost felt the weight of vulnerability pressing down on him. Bullets, threats, and the sharp sting of betrayal surrounded him, forcing him to act quickly, decisively, and without hesitation. Every choice in those moments carried consequences he could not undo. Every step, every word, every glance could be the difference between survival and complete destruction. In the chaos, Ghost displayed the cunning that would define his legend. He didn't panic. He didn't react blindly. Instead, he used the confusion to his advantage, turning traps into opportunities, threats into leverage. The betrayal, though painful, taught him something invaluable. No one was truly loyal, and no position of power was secure. He saw clearly for the first time that